the insulation people were up there Saturday, but not Sunday. They're coming back this Friday to hopefully finish up the work.
All right.
Very good.
You guys are
I,
live on YouTube.
all right.
All right. The sheriff was possibly going to join us. Eric, have you heard anything from him? If him or Major Holland was going to join us?
I have not.
Okay. I'll text him to see if we need to hang on just a minute for him to join in. Several of the other office holders said they either couldn't or that time conflicted or various reasons weren't going to be able to join in, but the sheriff was a maybe. So we'll see what he says on text message. Well, I think no reply is probably the answer. So I'm going to hit the record button since this is a public meeting. And just FYI to everyone, it will be recorded and it's going out public to YouTube right now. Okay, the sheriff says he cannot, but Major Holland is going to try. Well, when he joins us, he can join us. All right, I think we're recording now. Thank you, everyone, for joining in the COVID Response Committee meeting. Really appreciate your interest in this. The purpose of the committee is to respond to the public health emergency with respect to the COVID-19 pandemic and its negative economic impacts in such a way that transitions the Platte County government to the post-COVID period. I know that many different parts of the Platte County government have been working on how to transition us to the post-COVID period. The commission has certainly talked about it on multiple times, and the office holders have talked about it at office holder meetings. With the new funding coming through the American Rescue Plan Act, it seemed particularly important to move our various discussions into a unified setting so we can address it as an entire county government. So I really appreciate your thoughts and your efforts to help the county respond to COVID and to appropriately spend some of the money that the federal government is pushing our direction. As it stands right now, there's no specific budget for the COVID Response Committee. Nothing's been voted on by the commission. There's no decisions been made, but just so you know, it's possible that we could have a budget of $20 million. The strings that are attached to the $20 million right now, the first possible way that we can spend the money is to respond to the public health emergency, the COVID emergency, or to its negative economic impacts. There are several other allowed spending avenues that are set out in the statute. And we think that probably in the next coming days or weeks, the Department of Treasury will give us more guidance on what's allowed and what's not allowed. But I think it is a good time to start talking about what we can do with those federal funds and how we can use it to respond to COVID. The possible way forward for us, if we go down this route, if the county commission were to approve in general this idea of using the federal funds to respond to COVID by doing some county level projects, I think the commission could decide on that general concept. And then I think we could very easily handle each project one by one in the normal and established mechanisms that we have for putting out for bid and getting contracts and having the work done. I mean, the county has lots of experience, on the facilities front for if we need a new roof on a building. Daniel Erickson knows how to put that out for bid and submit it and get those contracts going and get the work done. The recorder's office knows how to line up vendors to handle digitization of their records and get bids on those and get contracts signed and to spend the money in that way. I don't think that we need to establish a whole new bureaucracy to distribute the federal funds if we do it in the established ways that we've been spending money, for years or decades. If we spend the money on county level projects, I think we already have those procedures established. So I asked the office holders to start coming up with some ideas on ways that we can respond to COVID and the ways that we can spend this new federal money. Some of them have replied to me. Several of them have replied to me on some ideas. It's real preliminary at this point because I think it's been passed into law just for a matter of days, and it's only been just a few days that I started talking to the office holders about what they might want to do. But Eric, you're here. We very much appreciate you having the forethought to work on this issue. I'd be happy to turn it over to you at this point to your thoughts on how county government can respond to COVID and transition to the post-COVID period.
Well, Joe, first off, I appreciate you putting this together. I think your thoughts are spot on about how we could address some of these things. And I really think that one of the things we learned as a result of COVID is that our buildings, while built completely properly when they were, now that we've learned that things are different as a result of a pandemic, and certainly when you're in a pandemic, that we could make the right sorts of improvements to our buildings to make them accommodate a post-COVID environment, or even an ongoing COVID environment, to respond to COVID in an appropriate way. And I think that could require, if we were to really get our courthouse and frankly our administration building where they needed to be, I think frankly it would cost several $1 million to do that. But given the limited guidance that we have right now, I think those sorts of projects could qualify for use of COVID funds. And we know that we've got, for example, our beautiful historic courthouse is not particularly well set up for a COVID environment. And we could make those sorts of improvements to improve that courthouse for everybody in the long term. Same thing is true of, frankly, of my own office, which I know well. But I think it's true of other county offices that I don't know as well, in addition. One of the other things that we've been talking a lot about countywide, I know that Dan Erickson and I have had this discussion, and I think we're going to do it at least in our office as we're remediating the air issues on the third floor. But there's been a lot of talk about ways that we should improve HVAC systems to provide appropriate air filtration. I would think that would be a good thing to do with this sort of money. I can think of a couple of other projects that would be much less expensive. I think all those projects we're probably talking many millions of dollars. I can talk about some other projects that I think would take less money, but things like improving our pretrial services in Platte County. We know the impact that COVID had on the way we deal with people prior to trial, and utilizing some money to improve those services, I think, would make sense. We also saw a huge change in the way that we communicated with crime victims as a result of COVID, because we couldn't meet with nearly as many of them face to face. One of the things that we started doing was, frankly, not only talking with them on the phone, but also texting with victims. And we've learned that many of our victims, particularly our younger ones, prefer to communicate via text. And so I've been interested in trying to figure out how can we extend those communications into the post-COVID environment, because I don't think that's really a COVID thing. This is the new way people think and want to communicate. And so is there a way we can do that better? And again, it certainly helps us with maintaining communication when you may not be able to do it as much face to face because of a pandemic. So that's a really brief overview of some of the things that I've been thinking about that I think would be appropriate places to spend this money.
Yeah, and I'm sure that you can speak to the backlog of the criminal courts on cases. I know from my private practice, the courts are backlogged on civil cases as well. It could be a response to COVID to do something to help the courts clear out those backlogs. How long has it been since there's been a jury trial, a criminal jury trial?
So we haven't tried a case now in over a year, and the plan at this point is to begin trying cases on May the 3rd. So we will have gone close to 15 months without trying a single criminal case. And of course, during that entire 15 months, we're still filing cases as well. And so there is light at the end of the COVID tunnel. Unfortunately, for the court system, that light is the oncoming train of all of the cases, both criminal and civil, that haven't been disposed of for very good reasons because of the pandemic. But now we're going to have to dispose of, and it's going to be a gargantuan task to catch back up.
Before COVID, I know the criminal courts, that the defendants that were in custody, they would be collected in groups of 6 or 8 and brought up to the courtroom for their court appearances. Is that still happening, or how is?
So that's not happening. What is happening actually is a better way to do it, in my opinion, if we had everything we needed to do it. Now they are appearing from the jail via video link, which is much better, much safer. As you'll recall, during your time as an assistant prosecuting attorney, we have had issues with assaults by people who are incarcerated against our courtroom deputies and other sheriff's department employees as they're being brought from the jail to court. And we can minimize those chances. There have been multiple occasions where we've had, while somebody's been on an elevator, that there have been fights that have broken out between jail detention staff and inmates. We can reduce the chances of all of that by leaving them in the jail. That's what we've been doing. That's a great thing in response to COVID. But we need to keep doing that. But right now, I think we only have one hookup from the jail, one video room where we can do those appearances from. We need more than one. We often have 2 court divisions going at one time on criminal cases. So at minimum, you need 2, but it'd be better to even have more than that, so that criminal defendants could also be speaking with defense counsel, either before or after dockets or any time of the day, rather than defense counsel having to appear in person at the jail. There are many, many communications, I think, that wouldn't have to happen with physical interaction, but could much more easily occur, just like we're doing now, through an electronic, still face-to-face communication, but not having to be personally present.
Right. Rob, how about you? Do you want to chime in on, as part of the American Rescue Plan, talks about lost revenue and replacing lost revenue, and as the county treasurer, you want to talk to some of that?
Yeah, I believe that, and justifiably so, a lot of our focus has been on the top line general sales tax revenue and the use tax. And last year, and this was not only a response to COVID, but I believe the general trend of our shopping habits had changed in the direction we're heading. The largest increase that we've ever seen and the highest numbers we've ever seen in use tax. And when you take a look at the top line number, buying general revenue and the use tax, there was not the dramatic fall in numbers that was expected when we were having these conversations in March, in April, and in May. And I believe, and if you look at the numbers, it all bears out that it was the use tax surge that really addressed them. Now, the reason I keep saying to focus on the top line number, if you look at sales taxes that are dedicated to different functions,
might have an opportunity.
parks and such
So, as you know, that
where those budgets are greatly impacted.
COVID money coming around.
Sales tax.
Like Casey's going to get 100.
And also going a bit further, and we need to, probably not the time to get in the weeds, and I'll admit I have not gotten into all the weeds yet.
Oh, okay.
We look at a lot of our essential services that are funded by fees.
She and I were talking about a while ago.
As I was looking at the budget, there was a precipitous drop in the amount of revenue for
and that's just
services. Just as a real quick top line number, road sales tax was down last year over $588,000. And that's not just Platte County spending money. Those are our cities that rely on a portion of those funds, particularly our smaller municipalities, where that share of road sales tax makes all the difference.
There's also some
parks.
over here in the main
The park sales tax was down over $784,000.
and a couple other offices,
I believe something we need to take a look at, and part of it's based on my reading of the statute,
So,
as well as some additional research, is taking a look at what government services were interrupted in 2020 due to the pandemic, not only because of the situation, health situation, but also due to the fact that there was less revenue that was available for road repair, other infrastructure repair, parks maintenance, fee-related services. That's going to take some time to work on. And perhaps, Dan could speak to this more. Bob Heim, our Director of Public Works, a later meeting could speak to that I believe looking at the numbers, you can find a real correlation with there was a reduction in essential services by the county due to the decline in these sales taxes. And that is part and parcel of what the statute calls for and what the money needs to be spent on. So I believe that's one issue, taking a look at not only what happened in 2020 and what we needed to do in 2020, but because of the pandemic we could not, but also taking a look at this as a way forward for an investment for the future. That everybody says they want to go back to normal. I say let's go forward to better. Let's figure out if there's a better way for us to serve the public, to provide these services. Platte County, as a matter of policy, decades ago, I recall one former commissioner telling me very deliberately went towards the sales tax model for funding government services away from the tax levy. And there's a number of things Eric or Sheriff Holland could speak to about how fees generate through the court system to pay for these essential services. You take a look at all of those numbers, there were hits all up and down the board. And the question is, what was the bottom line impact? What did we lose service-wise? And, that's something that we do need to make part of this discussion. It's something allowable by the statute itself. And I think And I think a very appropriate use of the money is to talk about not only long-range plans, but the immediate situation we're dealing with COVID, as well as what the world is going to look like post. So if you get into the numbers, yes, generally, we came out better than we expected, particularly with what we were feeling in March and April. But if you look at some services and some things that we have to do, the funding sources that relied on sales taxes, those were hit. And that had a direct hit on the services that we need to provide for our citizens.
I'm glad you're there, Rob, keeping an eye on it. That's certainly something that's covered under the statute, the reduced revenues, and it's good that you're keeping looking at that, examining that. I'll share a couple of things. Some of the office holders that couldn't be on the meeting today, Gloria Boyer, the recorder of deeds, she is reaching out to vendors regarding digitizing her records. Quite a bit of her records are available online now, but she has quite a bit more that are not. And that would be a response to COVID, because if someone needs to research real estate records or plats, or the records that she keeps, instead of having to drive to Platte City and just stand in a small room with other people to look at the paper documents, if those records were digitized, then the consumer could look at that from home or from wherever they might be. So that's a possibility that we'll look at. Sheila Palmer, the collector of revenue, has talked to me about when it comes to tax time, that frequently there's a line of people outside of her office that snakes through the building, people that want to pay their taxes, and she's up on the second floor, and that there might be a possibility of employing an architect to help us restructure where the offices are in the administration building, possibly also in the courthouse, in the old courthouse, so that the offices that have lots of customer contact, face-to-face dealings with people are in the easily accessible parts of the building on the first floor, and the offices that don't have face-to-face contact with the community maybe are on the second floor or in the basement. I know from personal experience, the Division 5 courtroom in the past on Wednesday afternoons is packed full of people waiting for their speeding ticket to be heard. And everyone that wants to get down to Division 5, they either have to ride a very small elevator or walk down the stairs. So there might be some possibilities of restructuring where the busiest courtrooms are maybe more easily accessible to the public. Another one that I'll mention is the Board of Equalization. That's the group that hears appeals on assessments to property, to real property. As you might imagine, the commercial real estate market has gone through dramatic upheaval this year, because so many people are working from home and businesses are just shifting to a model where their employees work from home. And that has caused commercial real estate prices to plummet in many cases. And with those falling values of commercial real estate, we're anticipating a very large amount of appeals of the assessed value of real estate. I think the same is going to happen for residential real estate. We've seen, anyone that's watching has seen the prices of residential real estate go shooting up through the roof. Interest rates are very low. People are working from home. If they want to work from home, maybe they want a bigger house, something that has an extra room for a home office. And that has caused that sector of the real estate market to go up. And because of that, we're anticipating a large number of appeals on the valuation. And it's a possibility that we might spend some of this new federal money to address that situation, so we can work through that influx of appeals to appraisals, to valuations in a quick way, and still get all the work done on time. I've talked to the sheriff about multiple ways that they might be able to respond to COVID with the sheriff's department. The first one that stands out in my mind is what Eric mentioned, the video links. If we continue to use video court, it may be a substantial savings to have more video rooms in the jail and the detention center, so multiple inmates can either visit with the lawyers or go to court without ever leaving the building, without leaving the security of the building. So I think there are many ways that we might be able to respond to the public health emergency and also transition our county level government to the post-COVID period that could really be beneficial. Daniel Erickson, I know you've started some early thoughts on facilities in particular. I think there might be some opportunities to respond to the changes and use some of this money.
Yeah, thanks, Joe, and thanks for putting this group together. Obviously, we need to know the details of what is eligible and what's not eligible. But certainly, there are needs here at the county. There's a capital projects list of needs. I think the courthouse is obviously, as Eric mentioned, it's a historic structure. The admin building, it's coming up on 30, 40 years. It's at the point of needing some serious maintenance and improvement. Some of those systems are starting to fail. So, and we also maintain juvenile building, public works, and the resource center. So there's not a shortage of needs, and we've got a list of projects. And really, it depends on what the strings are to this money, how it can be, if it can be applied to those projects, that's great. If it can't, then it won't be able to. But and I'd also you all talked about the issue of digitization and homework. I will give my perspective on that. It was basically a year ago when we abruptly shut down the operations, and all the county employees work from home. And actually, it worked better than anyone could expect. I was really, we were able to issue building permits. People were able to get to their email and access some of their files via the Google networks, but there was a limitation, and the limitation was nobody had access to their documents. And unfortunately, there are a lot of paper files out there that eventually you need access to, and we ran into that as the people worked from home. The longer they had to work from home and didn't have access to that, it became more difficult for them. So, getting those records digitized would be a wonderful thing, not only for storage and space concerns, but also for flexibility to do that work from home if and when, and being able to email around files opposed to searching going to the futures for a file or looking for an old building permit from 1977 in a file cabinet somewhere. So that's a real credit to Ted in his operation, because to be able to do what we did was amazing, but there are still other limiting factors, and the biggest being not having access to those paper files, at least most of them. So, and to switch my hat, put my planner hat on. Another, depending on how what the strings are to this money, and there's obviously opportunities for investment. You can talk about economic investment, talk about infrastructure, roads, bridges, and those kind of things that create opportunities for jobs and economic growth and those kind of things.
All right, thank you, Daniel. And Ted, are you still there, or did you get pulled away for anything?
I am still here.
Daniel was talking a little bit about the work from home transition. That was, I don't know, was it a heroic job to get the switch to work from home for so many people so quickly?
I think mostly it was all of a sudden people are working from home, so switching from the mentality that, hey, I'm sitting at my desk as an employee and doing my job, and then all of a sudden I'm trying to remote into my desktop at work. So those challenges, a little bit of learning curve there. Yes, we had procedures on how you do that, for those that have line of business applications that run inside our network. But as both Rob and Eric know, both of their line of business applications are both hosted now, as are our files, as is the email, so on and so forth. And so really that made the lift and shift of workloads to the cloud in the first place. That makes the transition of whether you're going to make the decision, okay, I'm going to be working inside the building, I'm going to be working from home. As long as I can get to the internet, I can do my job. As years go by, I encourage everybody that has a line of business application that runs on premises, keep getting with your vendor year by year and asking that question, because really at the end of the day, it's business continuity. Can we keep doing our job in a disaster? This is not the disaster that we had imagined. Most of the time we think of fire, we think of tornado, we think of water, but nobody imagined, at least I didn't, a disaster, on this scale. It affects not just some, it affects everyone in the world. And so, as we move forward and we look into the future, moving workloads, whether it's a line of business application for a department, an elected official, or moving our entire infrastructure, all the physical hardware that runs in the server room on premises, as we look to the future and as the numbers start to flow better from a financial perspective for the county, we'll be looking to transition more and more of our infrastructure and paying for it as a service on a monthly basis. So those are the kind of issues that I look for. But specific to your question on remote, after about 3 weeks, everything was business as usual. You'll always have, from a remote perspective, you'll always have your challenges because, where does the employee live? Are they up north in the county where they don't have very good internet access in the first place? Have they read the procedures? Yes, they read the procedures, but they weren't quite clear enough. So that's a challenge on my part, and it tells me I need to be more clear in the direction that I give on how you as a user, access the network. So those kinds of issues are the things that we've dealt with.
If the county wanted to push forward with more employees working from home, are there some things we can do technology-wise to help make that easier?
Well, the capital expenditures, on top of my head, what are the capital expenditures? What are the challenges from a resource perspective for physical equipment? Is everybody going to get a laptop that they're going to have at home? Is everybody going to have a phone? A mobile phone. I can tell you that, in May we're going to put out an RFP for a new hosted phone system. Well, what is that going to provide for besides business continuity? Meaning the building goes away, as long as you can get to the internet, you can still make and receive phone calls with your business number. Really what we have in place right now, I think for the most part, with line of business applications running on premises aside, we're doing a pretty good job, frankly. And the departments that are looking to move to hosted at some point in time would be from the commission side would be, for instance, Public Works. Their line of business application runs in my server room. The assessor line of business applications run in my server room. Recorder of Deeds runs in the server room. But all your vendors, you're beholden to your vendor, really. You keep pinging them, you keep pushing them, but at some point, everything will be hosted. That's a matter of fact. But I feel that given the resources that we're putting forth now, we're doing a good job with what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What about? I think the county has a real nice website now, and some of the offices have their own separate website. Is there any opportunity if we were able to respond to the public health emergency by bettering, making it even better, our interface with the citizens?
There's always opportunity for that, but and once again, it's a matter of resourcing it correctly. I get spam and I get vendor emails all day, every day of people trying to sell a service. And, up until the pandemic, it was, it was never, it was something that we didn't really consider. But again, we're starting to think about how we, how we're going to provide services to our taxpayers and, to the citizens. So yes, it's something that I'm starting to do research into, providing those services. And I'm going to say over the last, probably since the new year, I've been looking at it. Our website, the county website, while it is what we would call a dynamic website, it's not fully built out and resourced the way that perhaps if we're going to move forward with wanting to provide services to the citizens, it won't do that. So I'm doing the research and obviously would be more than happy to sit down with you and the other two commissioners on those opportunities.
Yeah, just from personal experience, one small advance that I was shocked at how nice it was with the assessor's office. They send out the forms do you still own this particular car? Did you own it on January 1? And, I'd always penciled in, yes, I own this, and you scratch out and you put in the new VIN if you changed cars. And I noticed this year that there's a little QR code on the letter that was sent out. And I was able to take a picture of that with my iPhone, and it went into something with the internet. And I was able to basically fill out the form that, yes, I hadn't changed any cars and I still own the real estate, all through my iPhone. And it took about 5 minutes. Right. It was just incredible that there's been that, advance in that small area. I know that's not everything, but I just imagine that there's quite a few advances that are happening like that we can continue to push forward to make it easier for citizens to deal with the county business.
Absolutely.
And to sort of jump on that point, I think this ties in very directly for the purposes of this, because we, as a health concern with the current pandemic, and a public safety concern, if we can reduce the amount of foot traffic in the building, that not only makes the county building a healthier place, so that there's not a risk of spread or anything like that due to the pandemic, but also makes it better for the citizen in trying to unify best we can sort of our digital infrastructure, hardwire the digital infrastructure so that there's sort of a one-stop shop to pay your taxes, get a receipt, do different things like that. And of course, being the parent to Park Hill students, it's very much in my mind about the risks that are out there. And I think it's all ties in together, part and parcel of, we talk about a post-COVID future. I think a lot of these things we're going to be our future anyway. But the pandemic really made us sort of forced us to address a lot. The should-dos are now must-dos. And that's what I'm hoping that in these discussions and with the use of these federal funds that we're focused on to make that investment.
I see Eric Hollins joined the call. Eric, are you there? Are you there, Major Holland? We'd be happy to turn it over to you if you want to talk a little bit about some ideas and possibilities with the Sheriff's Department. You must be experiencing technical difficulties. Do the IT people still blame everything on sunspots? There, the sunspot's cleared up. Although he's still on mute. I see a little microphone there, but it's muted. I think we're all getting better with video conferencing. This is my third Google Meet. I've done plenty of Zooms and quite a few WebExes. The federal courts are using Zoom, the state courts are using WebEx. I've heard it's a little bit of an issue of different platforms talking to each other. And my impression is maybe the sheriff's office doesn't use Google Meet as much as others. 1 second. You can just write it up and hold it up to your webcam. You know, like what you want to say.
Joe, as the host, can you unmute him? Who's the host of the meeting?
I think I am. Ted, can you unmute him?
I don't believe so, since you're the host.
It says, oh, there.
There we go. There
All right, I think
Oh,
you were live for a second.
Can you hear me now?
there we go.
Yeah. All right,
Yes.
Eric. We've kind of gone around the horn with ways that we can respond to the public health emergency and its negative economic impacts in a way that transitions county government to the post-COVID period. Do you want to chime in on some ideas from the Sheriff's Department?
There's really 5 things that we've kind of identified. Through the last round of CARES money, kind of going off of Rob's comment, we purchased an online reporting software that would allow citizens to make certain types of police reports online. Obviously, any of your major crimes, we're still going to go on scene, but if it's a mailbox smashing or something where there's no evidence, no suspect information, that kind of stuff, they could do that online. I think over time, that type of resource is going to require some additional server infrastructure. And this may not be a bad time to go ahead and buy those servers with this CARES money. I don't know if Ted brought this up or not, but right now we don't have a fiber line running to the resource center. And there's fiber running along Ambassador and I-29 for sure. So this may be a good opportunity to run fiber into the resource center and increase the bandwidth going to the resource center, which will both help us with redundancies for the county, because, correct me if I'm wrong, Ted, you guys have information running back and forth from the courthouse complex to the resource center.
We do.
And I know we do as well as our backups. Plus, that would allow for all the tenants down there to do more virtual meetings, things of that nature, along the way. I know I've mentioned this to you briefly, Joe, but we've got at a minimum, 20-year-old HVAC system in the complex, probably older in certain parts of the building. I know large parts of this are a closed air system, so it's recirculating air through the complex, which is how when we had like the towel fire down in laundry in the jail, we end up with smoke in the comm center, upstairs in the sheriff's office, and some in the admin building. This may be an opportunity to redo the HVAC system for the entire complex and make it a positive air system where it's sucking air out, and maybe put in some UV lights in the ductwork to help kill bacteria and viruses along the way. We talked about getting some of the temperature checker stations for the admin building entrance, the sheriff's office entrance and SSU, and the jail. And then the other thing we identified is some additional infrastructure towards patrol laptops and things of that nature, which allow for in-field reporting and keep them out of the building and out of patrol as much as possible.
Yeah, I think that's the way of the future, is to keep people out of the building and wherever they are doing their work, to be able to do their work from that location.
Now, I don't know the prices on a lot of this stuff just yet. Obviously, probably servers, you're probably, Ted, correct me if I'm wrong, you're probably 17 to 20,000 on a server. I think your HVAC is probably your biggest lift out of all of that. I remember a few years ago when they were doing the jail redesign for that tax, just redoing that section was $2 to $4 million. So I think that's going to be depending on how far you go with that, I think that's probably your biggest lift if you're going to do that. The fiber, I think you're probably looking at maybe $1,000 a month, Ted. I guess it kind of depends on the size of your pipe.
Size of your pipe, yeah. It's I think we're paying right around that for half gig right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. Or go ahead.
Those are just kind of the thoughts we had putting our heads together, both from sheriff's operation and then entire complex standpoints.
Good. I appreciate your help on this, and everyone else, all the other office holders and staff. I think, as we get more guidance from the Department of Treasury on what we can spend this money on, it's important that we start making plans on how we can respond to COVID and transition the county government, and use this money on the needs that we have, because I think we have plenty of needs. We can solve a lot of problems. If we can, find one-time expenditures to use this money on, we might be able to lower some long-term budget impacts, and might be very beneficial for the county over the long term. Anyone else want to chime in? I think I've given the updates from the office holders that couldn't be here. Let me make sure. But Eric or Rob or Dan or Ted, anything else you want to throw in?
Is there any money from the original CARES Act left that can be tossed on top of this 20 million, or is it only the 20 million?
The original CARES money, we're getting close to the end of distributing that. And as we get closer, we get a better idea of what's left over, if anything. I know the auditor's office is tracking that closely. But it's, the round one business grants are, I believe, almost completely gone out. The round two business grants, my understanding is they're still reviewing documentation to make sure that those grants go out to the people that need them, and that have proved that they satisfy the grant requirements before sending the check out. I think that's going for some of the public entities now also. There's still some verification process happening before we can know how much is left over, if anything, from the first round of the first CARES money from last year.
And I think one important thing to note about the American Rescue Plan funds, the entire 20 million will not be coming in one deposit. We've got about a 60-day window for the first half of the money. And as I was studying the statute, it looks like the second half of the money comes no later than a year after implementation. So we're really looking at a phased approach. There's also the deadline is, I believe, 2024 to spend them. So let's include that in our analysis as we're thinking about it, because it's not, I'm not going to wake up tomorrow, look at the bank statement, and see an extra $20 million. I must be a bad politician, because whenever I see a huge influx of money, I'm very concerned and want to account for every penny. And so by May, we'll have 10 million and change, and then perhaps a year from March 2022 will be the rest of the funds. So let's sort of keep that in mind for the parameters. Also, how we can perhaps leverage other federal resources. We're talking about digital structure, fiber band, and laying the fiber lines. There are specific funds for rural infrastructure that I believe the state is looking at, the federal government is looking at, and perhaps we reach out to more folks and try to make this collaborative as possible to leverage those resources.
We had talked to the state, and it was a 30-second flyby on the fiber thing, and I think the issue at the resource center is it's inside the corporate limits of the city of Kansas City, so it's not defined as rural by their standards, but it's the state, so that could shift at any point.
Right. Daniel, do you want to talk on if we have major projects through the courthouse or the administration building or the detention center, timing wise, is spending the money by the end of 2024, is that something that's going to be doable to get all of that decided over the next few months and then go through the entire process to make it happen?
Yes. I mean, it depends on the projects and how many there are. I mean, it takes a lot of time to do a project, to take it out to bid and to look at the bids and oversee its construction. I mean, it may be worth having a discussion about getting a project manager or somebody like that in there to help manage if it turns into a lot of projects in a short span. But yeah, we can do it.
All right. Well, I'm thinking for the next meeting, I'll just email the office holders and the department heads, and we'll try to pick a time that works for everybody. But I think if all the key players here are thinking along these lines of how can we respond to COVID with these new federal funds in ways that are basically one-time expenditures, because this is only a one-time, set of money coming in. Well, it's two times. It's half now and half a year from now. But this is not long-term funding coming from the federal government. It's coming in two pieces, but that's it. So we need to. I think it's important for us to look at projects that we can get done now. In the next several months and a couple of years, that could save us long-term expenses in the budget and also help us to transition to this new period. Whether that's the sheriff's department being able to let citizens do reporting, from home, if it's just a broken mailbox where there's no suspect, or if it's someone that wants a building permit, to be able to do that online rather than coming into the building, or if it's paying taxes to help make it easier for folks to pay their taxes online rather than coming into the building. And if they do want to come into the building, to make it more convenient and safer for those customers and also safer for our employees, because we certainly want to have facilities that help our employees be resilient to COVID and not susceptible to COVID, and air quality is a big part of that. So I really appreciate everyone's help on this and this post-COVID transition period, and I think we got a lot to do left. But anybody else want to chime in before I wrap up the meeting?
No. Joe, thanks for doing this.
I think it's very important that we think long-term, and I think I'm sure you all agree this is time to put some long-term thinking, some big ideas out there of how we can really do some benefits for the county. This $20 million is nothing that the county commissioner, I don't think any county office holders asked for. And we might individually agree or disagree with whether or not it's good for America, but the fact is it's coming our way. And if we don't use it to solve some of our problems, it's basically giving the money to other local governments around the country. And maybe, it's the equivalent of giving money to local governments that aren't as well managed as our local government. But I'm real optimistic that we can get some things done with this. All right, if there's nothing else, I'll shut down the call, and I'll be in touch through email to set up the next meeting. So thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, everyone.